September 22nd, 1828. Dusk at Kwa Dukuza, the royal kraal. A powerful figure paces alone in his private hut. Shaka, king of the Zulus, hasn't slept in his own quarters for weeks. Tonight, he's here because his brothers insisted on an urgent meeting. He knows what that means. Through the wall, he can hear his personal guards stepping aside. They're letting his brothers pass, the same guards who once would have died to protect him. After a lifetime of watching his back, even the great lion of Africa grows weary. He could call out. His army of 50,000 warriors is just beyond these walls. But what's the point? When you can't trust your own blood, who can you trust? You might think being the most powerful ruler in southern Africa meant having everything. But for Shaka, it meant spending every day wondering which friend, which brother, which trusted advisor would try to kill him next. This is the story of a man who conquered a continent, only to die alone in a hut, betrayed by the very family he had fought to protect. Before we dive into this story, let me tell you about a different Shaka. Not the great king, but a young boy whose very name was an insult. Shaka, the intestinal beetle, they called him. Born illegitimate, rejected by his father's people, forced to wander from village to village with his mother Nandi. This boy would grow up to command the most powerful army in southern Africa. He would revolutionize warfare, build an empire, and become one of history's most innovative military leaders. But his early years as an outcast would shape everything: his drive for power, his inability to trust, and ultimately, his downfall. Over the next few minutes, we'll see how a lifetime of isolation turned to paranoia, how the power he gained made trust impossible, and how the very innovations that made him great would eventually help destroy everything he built. If you're fascinated by how power shapes and often destroys those who wield it, hit subscribe. We're creating a whole series about great leaders who changed warfare forever and paid the ultimate price for their innovations. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Let's start with young Shaka's earliest memory, being mocked by other children, while his mother Nandi tried to shield him from their cruelty. Unlike other great leaders who were born into privilege, Shaka's childhood was marked by constant rejection and humiliation. Dr. Mumbongeni Ngema, a historian of the Zulu kingdom, explains, "The name Isishlangu Sinye, the boy of the single shield, followed him everywhere. It meant his father had paid only one cattle hide for his mother's marriage price. Every time he heard it, it reminded him that he didn't belong." In Zulu culture, where ancestry and lineage were everything, this marked him as permanently outside the traditional power structure. He wasn't just an illegitimate child, he was someone who could never truly be part of the system he would later rule. But here's where Shaka's story becomes unique. Instead of breaking him, this rejection shaped him into something new. He took the traditional military system, the same one that had marked him as an outsider, and completely transformed it. By 1816, now a minor chief, he made his first radical change, eliminating the throwing spear in favor of a short stabbing spear called the iklwa. Its name came from the sound it made when withdrawn from an enemy's body. It was revolutionary, but this was just the start. He redesigned the traditional cowhide shield, making it longer and larger. He ordered his warriors to fight barefoot for better mobility, burning their sandals. Most radically, he banned the time-honored practice of distant spear throwing, forcing warriors to fight at close quarters. To enforce these changes, he had to execute warriors who refused to adapt, including childhood friends who had once shown him kindness during his outcast years. As one oral history records, when asked why he executed a childhood friend for refusing the new weapon, Shaka replied, "In battle, memory of kindness gets warriors killed." He was creating the most effective military force in southern Africa, but the cost was his humanity. This pattern would define his rule. Each innovation isolated him further. He banned his warriors from marriage, applying the same standard to himself. He eliminated traditional councils, trusting only his personal judgment. By the time he was king, he had no real friends, no wife, no children, just power and the constant fear of losing it. Have you ever achieved something great only to find it cost you everything else? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What price is too high for success? But perhaps the most tragic part of Shaka's story was how his power made trust impossible. Early in his career, serving under Chief Dingiswayo, he survived 3 assassination attempts in a single month. One night, his own food taster died from poisoned meat meant for him. These experiences changed him. He began sleeping in different huts each night, never telling anyone, even his guards, where he would rest. He would sometimes test his warriors' loyalty by having them charged with fake crimes, executing those who admitted guilt, even under torture. But the breaking point came in 1827 with the death of his mother, Nandi, the one person he had always trusted. Convinced she had been poisoned, he unleashed a purge that would shock even his most loyal followers. The oral histories tell us he ordered that no crops should be planted for a year, no milk should be consumed, and any woman found pregnant should be executed along with her husband. Some estimates suggest 7,000 people died in this period of mourning. He had become trapped in a cycle of paranoia and violence. If you're finding this exploration of power and paranoia fascinating, hit that like button. It helps more people discover these important historical stories. But the cruelest twist in Shaka's story wasn't just that he died alone. It was that the very innovations he created to protect his people would eventually help destroy them. In 1824, he encountered British firearms at Port Natal, and for the first time, the great innovator found himself on the wrong side of military evolution. His response was to try to adapt, sending emissaries to learn about European weapons. But time was against him. The very tactics he had developed, the famous bullhorns formation, the close combat fighting style, the psychological warfare, would later be studied and used against the Zulu people by colonial forces. Dr. Sarah Johnson, a military historian, explains, Shaka's innovations were so effective that both the British and the Boers studied and adapted them. They combined his tactical insights with their superior technology. In a way, his genius helped create the tools of his people's eventual defeat. The final betrayal came from within. On that September evening in 1828, his half-brothers Dingane and Mlengana, along with a servant named Mbopa, assassinated him in his hut. According to oral tradition, he recognized the look in his brother's eyes, the same look he had seen in so many others before they tried to kill him. But this time, he simply stood there. Some say he smiled. His reported last words were prophetic. "Are you killing me, my brothers? You will come to an end through killing one another." He was right. The kingdom he built would tear itself apart through civil war, making it vulnerable to the very enemies he had spent his life trying to defend against. If you've made it this far, you clearly appreciate deep dives into how great leaders can be destroyed by their own innovations. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because next week we're exploring another ruler who changed warfare forever and paid the ultimate price. Remember, as Shaka's story shows us, sometimes the traits that make you great are the same ones that make you unable to enjoy that greatness.